Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank all of you for your work. I would like to address an announcement this week in Chicago from Northwestern University. It was a breakthrough in their research related to the brain, and it has a personal element to it. We lost two of the pillars of the United States Senate to glioblastoma, brain cancer, Senator McCain, Senator Kennedy. I understand the treatment of this terrible disease is limited by and large to surgical intervention because of the blood-brain barrier. Now, I'm going to stop trying to sound like I'm ever attended medical school or even got close to one. But in reading the news account of this Northwestern University breakthrough, it appears that they have now opened the blood-brain barrier to allow drugs to pass through to the brain, meaning that unusable chemotherapy drugs can now reach brain tumors. So there's an option beyond surgery, or could be soon. The process they've created is known as sonication, and I won't go any further to try to describe it. But it also said in the article that this could have an application on Parkinson's as well as Alzheimer's. Would someone please comment as to whether this was an NIH-funded research project and what the prospects may be?
Senator, I don't know the answer to that, and we'll have to get back to you for the record.
Well,
I mean, certainly it's a breakthrough, and unless one of my colleagues knows specifically, no, we'll get back to you for the record, sir.
the second point I'd like to raise is a number of people said to me, if you ever get NIH in front of you, ask them why they aren't putting more money into mental health research. I noticed in your opening statement you talk about precision medicine, but when we look at the scourge of mental illness in this country, particularly as it affects young people now in extraordinary numbers and percentages, could you give me some kind of point of reference as to how much is being invested in mental health or mental illness as opposed to physical illness?
If Dr. Josh Gordon could answer that question, sir.
Well, we're talking strictly dollars here. We're talking the National Institute of Mental Health's budget is about $2 billion. There's a couple $1 billion more in NIDA and NRAAA. But of course, the crisis isn't about dollars, it's about people. We are in the midst of a national mental health crisis, and we have to respond. You noted in particular two priorities that we are highlighting in our research response and are highlighted by the President in the Unity Agenda: precision psychiatry and youth mental health. On the precision psychiatry space, we know that we need to do a better job in psychiatry in matching patients with treatments. And we also know that we're on the cusp of being able to do for mental health, at least for some parts of mental health like depression and schizophrenia, what the NIA has done for Alzheimer's, that is, develop and prove biomarkers can work and can be used in the clinic to help guide clinical decision-making and to innovate in treatments. And so we are spearheading, in the President's budget, we are proposing two large initiatives in precision psychiatry, one aimed more generally at mental health and one aimed at depression. On the youth mental health space, again, we know from a lot of different studies what to do, but we need to do a better job of figuring out how to implement things like suicide prevention programs and mental health prevention programs and early detection and early prevention treatments for psychosis in youth, in schools, through digital health and through other settings that we know can reach children. So those are two of our priorities in those areas.
Many of the cities across America face what Chicago faces with gun violence, particularly from young people. I went to the Cook County Juvenile Facility where teenagers are being held waiting for trial, many of them accused of murder. They spend 1 to 3 years in this building. They've created a high school in the building for these teenagers. It looks like a regular high school inside, gymnasium, cafeteria, classrooms, and such. And when I asked the counselors, what do you find when you sit down and talk to these young people who are on trial for murder and accused of gun violence? They said, well, we find the full menu of mental illness, but the one recurring theme is trauma. They've been exposed to trauma in their lives, and it's really changed the way they look at the world. Senator Capito and I have a bill on this issue, looking at trauma, ACEs. It just seems to me that when we talk about youth mental illness, this is the most obvious frontline challenge that we face. What should we be doing now that we're not doing when it comes to trauma exposure?
You're 100% correct that trauma is at the root of much mental illness, not only in childhood, but in adulthood as well. We know we need to do a better job of building resilience to trauma. One of the earliest findings in trauma research was that successful navigation of trauma in childhood can lead to resilience to a range of mental health consequences later in life. And so that's really been the focus of much research at NIH and really needs to be the focus of implementation moving forward.
I would just say in closing that I've been proud of this subcommittee and what it's achieved in terms of funding for NIH research. The 2% figure sent to us by the administration is a true disappointment. I'm going to tell the president as much. And the idea that the Republicans have suggested in the House of a 25% cut in NIH funding is scandalous. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.